Some of them literally just want me to be their salespeople and they're offering me commissions to go out and sell their stuff. And I don't want to be a salesperson.
That, guys, is Renee Hartmann, who's about to break down how to actually land your first board role. Welcome back to the Corporate Detox, the podcast where we talk about work, ambition, and life in and after corporate. Because, mi gente, we needed this. It's me, Elisa, longtime marketing expert and your favorite corporate escape artist. She spent more than 25 years across the US, Europe, Asia, helping companies grow. A few early roles at Ogilvy, Putnam Investments before becoming a founder, consultant, and now board member across some of the coolest retail tech and consumer brands. Her career has increasingly moved closer to one thing: being in the room where decisions get made. And what I found interesting is there's no clear path into this world of boards, no application process, no obvious starting point, and for most people, it feels completely out of reach. Before any of these formal boards, however, there was another one she had to convince first: her own kids to leave Southern California and move to Portugal. How long has it been since you've been in Portugal now?
It's been almost 4 years, which you would not know from my Portuguese, but it has been that long almost.
4 years. How adjusted are you and your family to Portugal now?
We're pretty I think we're adjusted and we're liking it. I've got a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old, so they were the big adjustments, but they're enjoying it, and it's been fun for me too. I think just getting to work a little bit more in Europe and spending more time here, so it's been great.
We're going to talk today about like board of advisors and board of directors, but you just talked about your daughter, your son, right? 15, 17. How was that convincing your own board of advisors, board of directors to move to Portugal?
They are definitely the hardest. There were some moments. They were both on board. It was an adjustment for sure. So I think they like it now, but it took some time to get through the process. They grew up in Southern California, and it was a big change. So.
Oh, wait, where in Southern California, Renee?
LA.
Okay, LA. Okay,
Redondo Beach, yeah. They were in school in Redondo Beach.
Did you use the same tools you use in business to try to convince them, or are there different mom skills at play?
There's way different mom skills. A lot of distraction, bribery,
All the above, all the above. One thing as we were doing this, I realized is there's so much terminology as it comes to board of advisors. Board of advisors, board of directors, there's informal advisor roles. Ground me a little bit. What are those things as someone who didn't know?
No, I mean, I think, there's lots of different ways to talk about it. I guess let's start kind of board of directors first, because that one's easiest to get through. Board of directors is a formal governance body, basically, for both private companies or public companies. It's something that you put into the bylaws. You have to sign with it. There is not necessarily financial risk around it, but you're signing off on things. As a board of director member, you need to sign off on financials. You have, quarterly reports, annual reports, but it's more of a formal body. Of course, there's varying levels of that. As a private company, it's formal. I've been on a nonprofit board of directors, and that's still formal. You need meeting minutes. Board of directors, very, very formal. There's lots of structure behind it. That is kind of on a class of its own, which is very different than board of advisors. Board of advisors is completely up to the company. Basically, there's no rules. There's no standards. There's no governance associated with it. It's literally up to the founder and the owner of the company to decide how they want to run it. You could meet. You could meet every 2 weeks, you could meet weekly, you could meet once a quarter, you could meet never, right? It's something that really the founder and the owner has to set up. It's not structured, it's completely voluntary, and it's something that needs to be set up by the company itself. And then there's the kind of these advisors. You could be an advisor to a company, but they might not have a board. They might just have one advisor, they may have a couple advisors. And usually in that scenario, you're more working with the founder directly, but it's not necessarily like a formal board. You're not part of a peer group. You don't have quarterly meetings, you don't have regular meetings. So the word advisor, I think, can be very fluid, I would say, in some ways. Sometimes it's more formal, sometimes it's less formal. Sometimes people use it almost like code for consultant. I think those two, where it becomes into kind of just like a quote unquote advisor, is a really fluid structure. Board of advisors, more formal, because typically then you have a board, you have a group of people, you have a meeting cadence, and there is some type of a board. But again, that kind of depends case by case on each company.
Yeah. So I mean, when you make it sound like director seems so formal, what is the advantage of going the director's route as opposed to just having an informal board of advisors?
Or from the company perspective? Or
from the company.
For the company, they have to have a board. It's a governance issue, right? I used to have a company that, particularly if you bring in outside investors, it's required. But a lot of times before you bring on outside investors, you could have an informal board. You technically have one. You have to sign meeting minutes. You have to file board reports. But if you don't have any outside investors in, it's kind of up to you to decide whatever regulatory, whether it's a country or state or whatever you need to do. They have certain filing deadlines and things like that. But once you bring investors on, it changes dramatically, right? Once you bring on a venture investor, the venture investor will negotiate a seat on the board. And because the board is what makes decisions, the board sets the budgets, the board can fire, they can hire. That's a decision-making and governance body of the company. Typically what you find is with board of directors, it's supposed to be uneven. You can't have a tie. You need to have 3, you need to have 5, you need to have 7 so that you can have a vote. This is when you hear Steve Jobs gets kicked out of his job or people vote to get Sam Altman out. That comes from the board. They're the ones who can fire a CEO. Actually, a lot of times what you have is the owner of a company or the CEO of a company, they get a board that gets hostile, they can actually get kicked out essentially from that. So there's a lot of power to being on the board. That's why companies have to structure them in a certain way. And typically when you bring in outside investors as a venture round, there's negotiation for do they have a seat on the board or not? And if they have a seat on the board, how many seats? And who else has a seat on the board? And I've even seen a lot of times, one of the roles that I do, and probably a lot of other people do, is what's called a non-executive director, right? Which is a board member who does not work at the company. And you're not connected with the company in any way. You're sort of like an outsider who's independent, right? And you usually are brought in for outside expertise, to have an outside voice within the company, because you have people who are inside the company who work there, who the CEO, the CFO, investors or owners. Sometimes they want somebody who's not connected to provide some perspective and some advice. So that's what people call like a NED, or a non-executive director, somebody who doesn't work at the company and doesn't invest in the company, but they're an outsider that comes and sits on the board.
Okay, I mean, this is why I wanted to have this episode, because I just feel there's this confusion about what it means and how to get there. You are on a few of those, all different iterations, as a NED and the director, an advisor. What boards are you on today?
Yeah, so I've done some in the past. So I've had my own company where I ran the board of directors there. I was kind of like the secretary there. I ran everything, and we had an outside investor on, we had a non-executive director, and we had internal. I had some experience running my own board with my own startup. I've been on board of directors of a nonprofit in the U.S., which is a little less formal, but still we had to do meeting minutes. And then currently I'm a non-executive director for a retailer in Ireland. I'm on their board as I'm the outside perspective that comes in. That's the board position, board of directors positions. I'm also on a couple different advisory boards. One is a fashion company called Sitka Semch, this awesome Peruvian designer. She's got a couple stores in Miami and is expanding by e-commerce. So that one is a great example of a quarterly board position where we meet every quarter. As a board, it's very structured and I think run quite well. We have actually a chair who chairs the board, who's an outsider who comes in and provides a lot of perspective. So I've learned a lot from him. I'm on a couple other technology advisory boards, which would be like tech companies. And some are more formal and some are less formal. So I've got a couple of those like loose advisor roles that I mentioned, and then a couple that are more formal advisory boards.
Yeah, as someone who's early on in their journey of advising, I want to know how you cracked it. Take me back to that first time that you got your first board opportunity.
Yeah.
What was happening in your career at the time?
I kind of started more, formally trying to go down this path about 3 or 4 years ago. I had talked to some friends who were doing this and thought, for me personally, for my long-term development, it's just something that I would find rewarding over time. What I like about it too is you can do this forever. You can go to your 80s and 90s and keep doing advisory stuff. And that is something that's appealing to me. Not that I want to work super hard in my 80s, but like just the fact that you can have that ability. Then I think, for me, I started out with startups and tech companies. I had a nonprofit as well. Started out doing it as just getting stock for it. I wasn't getting paid for it to start with. I learned some lessons along the way. I overcommitted sometimes on some of that stuff. Maybe got in situations where it wasn't clear what I was supposed to be doing. Specifically, the time commitment wasn't clear. I did learn a lot of those lessons, I think, early on. I mean, I still learn them a little bit now. But I kind of learned a bit of like how to set it up and structure it better up front, because I think when I first got into it, I didn't really know. And so I made some mistakes around having it being fuzzy and not clear.
The first time that you were part of a board for another company, how did that materialize? You said there were a couple conversations with your friends, but was it through your network?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say one was a nonprofit through some friends, so people who were founders. And then the other one, it was an interview process through my network. They were looking for a board member. They were looking through 4 people. They were interviewing. It was more of a formal process. And then through my network, I was introduced to them and then went through the interview process for that.
But even before your first project with them, they must have learned about you somehow. Did you know somebody maybe for a few years and then it became, let's like test out this project
I
together?
would say a lot of it, like again, it kind of comes to the network, right? Usually,
Yeah.
almost all of them, I was introduced by somebody else, right? It was like I met them through their VC, I met them through another investor of theirs, I met them through
Yeah.
somebody they worked with before. So in general, it's hard to have cold ones without anybody who knows you. It's possible, but it is a little bit harder.
So between that first conversation, how many touches do you think?
Do you know what's funny? Like I think sometimes I've done these where you start on like a contract for a couple months and start to work together and see if you like each other, right? So that's one way to
Right.
start. Say like, hey, let's do this project or let's try this, and then let's kind of see how it goes. Then we'll see if there's a
Yeah.
fit. So that's one way I've done it, which is just start working together, but maybe don't formalize an advisory role yet. Sometimes it's like you talk to people for a while and then the time is right, especially with startups. Startups, a lot of it's like, okay, I've been kind of building, I haven't really had time to deal with this, but okay, now I'm bringing an investor in, so now I need to deal with it. Or I'm planning to bring an investor in, so now I need to deal with it. So I think sometimes it's just timing. It's like you stay in touch with people, and then when the timing is right, it's just right. And then sometimes it's just they have the timing, it's an immediate need, and you just need to get to know them.
Maybe this could be months or years.
I think part of it is doing it. So like once you start doing it, people say, "Oh, you're an advisor. Like maybe you'd want to be that for this one." So I think that's part of it. I do think sometimes it's funny where things come from. Like you'll tell someone like, "Oh, I'm an advisor," then they'll say, "You know what? Actually, I know a company that just mentioned to me that they were looking for something." So I do think you kind of have to tell people or get involved and kind of actively look for it to a certain extent. Now, when I go talk about advisor positions, I'll usually will have 3 or 4 people who will reach out to me and say, like, "Hey, I want to do that too. Do you know anybody? How could I do that?" So I do think it's important to get out there. The other thing about this is it takes time. It takes a longer time than I think you think it's going to do. It's not like you just hang out a shingle and be like, hey, I want to be an advisor now. So I think that it is good to start early. It's not something you can just stop your work and say, like, I'm going to go be an advisor. Some people can. If you've been a CEO of a company or something, you're going to have, of a big public company, you got a lot of opportunities coming to you. But otherwise, I think you got to work at it a little bit.
A lot of the thing I've heard is long-term trust, building a relationship, right? Actually, let's put it in tangible terms. Thinking of the boards that you're on. How long were you in relationship with them before you became a board member?
I'd say it varies. I mean, not always long term. Sometimes it was just like right time, right place, right? And then some of them it was, starting. A lot of the ones that I developed a good relationship with, we started maybe small. Maybe it wasn't full advisor board. It was kind of like, let's just do something together. Let's get to know each other, and then we'll kind of work on it from there. But it kind of depends. I think it depends on what their needs are, and if it's something that's an immediate need versus like, hey, let's figure out where things go. So I think it kind of is dependent.
First conversation you were in, thinking back to that one, was it easy?
I think it usually takes time getting to know people. You have to spend some time getting to know the person because I think at the end of the day, I've had advisory roles, particularly with startups. It's a specific, I'm friends with the people that I want to work with. And I think you get to the point where as an advisor, you'll have people say like, I'm not telling anybody who works with me this, or I've got this problem, and they have to be able to confide in you. And I think you have to like the person for that to happen. You have to have some type of, you have to believe in what they're doing, first and foremost. You have to believe in whatever company they're building or doing. Just like it would if you were working with somebody. You want to like the people you're working with. You want to have some connection with them so that it feels like something good. So you have to treat it a little bit like you're joining a company, because you are joining a company, and then when you put it on your LinkedIn profile, you're connected with these people, you're vouching for these people. So you want to do your due diligence and make sure that it's something you believe in, that you think is good, that you've talked to other people in the company, you've talked to their clients, you've talked to people so that you feel like it's something that is you want to be involved in, right? Because at the end of the day, you don't want to just take it, just like any job. You don't want to take any job. You don't want to take any advisory role because it is something that you're committing to. And so you want to make sure that whoever you're committing to, you have a good fit with.
Like most things the first time, this board opportunity wasn't linear, it wasn't posted anywhere, and it definitely wasn't obvious. But what makes it especially hard is how rare it is. Only about 1% of executives ever end up serving on a board in their entire career. So this isn't just about how she got her first one. It's about how this world actually works when you zoom out, how these roles get created, how people get pulled in, and what most people completely misunderstand about how it all comes together. How do you hear that a board opening has popped up?
There's different ways and times people come up with a board, right? I would say there's different like inflection points of what happens. Some of it is early stage. I see a lot of people do it maybe after they do a seed round, right? So it's kind of like, I've got a little bit of money. Like, because before a seed round, you're just trying to figure out how to get anything done and to like make any money and to kind of get that going. And I find like, okay, you have a seed round, you have a little bit of money, but not enough to really make a huge difference, right? You can't go pay for big things. So a lot of times I'll see people maybe after seed round will add an advisory board there. And maybe it's a small advisory board, maybe it's just a couple of people. And then usually I'll see people, pre-Series A, post-Series A, because they're starting to scale, they need to add more people. I find it a lot of times they'll add them as they scale. Another inflection point I see is entering new markets, whether that is a new geographic market, whether that's a new industry or a new vertical, because you want to bring people in who know that market. Say you're a European company and you want to go to the US, it would be nice to have people in the US on your board. If you're going into, you went from fashion to furniture, maybe you want to get somebody in the furniture market on your board because you're adding a new vertical in. You want to have somebody who understands that industry and can provide advice. So I have seen that. I think there's also a discussion around how big is the advisory board and what, should people be adding to it on an ongoing basis. A lot of times when people form an advisory board for the first time, usually then you go from 0 to like 4, 5 people. That's a good time for people to get involved because you're building it for the first time. And the thing with advisory boards is they're meant to be long term. It's not meant to be something you renew all the time. Sometimes people do come on and off, but in theory, for people, if they find a company they like and they don't have an advisory board yet, it's good to say like, hey, if you get to the point where you're doing an advisory board, make sure to keep me in mind. I'd like to be involved in that, right? And it may not be the right time for them. They may say, something I'm thinking about down the road. I'm not quite there yet, but I'll let you know when I am, Because I think, like I said, founders are busy. They got a lot going on.
And just thinking back to these people that you met, what I'm hearing is a lot of it is a word of mouth.
The part that makes it a little bit difficult, especially when you first get into it, because someone's like, oh, just go tell people you're looking for board positions. You're like, okay, that seems like a strange thing to do. I do think it is partially word of mouth. There are some formal listings from time to time, but those are hard to come by. I don't know that I've ever met anyone who's gotten a board position or an advisor position from like a cold listing online. I do think it generally tends to happen through your network and through other people, which can be kind of annoying because you got to be out there a lot. It's hard to make those happen. But I think that is realistically where it comes from.
For you, you said you started 3 to 4 years ago was when you formally were okay, I want this to be a bigger part of my career. Yeah. And now having bigger part of those conversations, was it increasing the places you were in, the conferences you went part of, who you reached out to?
One of my old bosses has that terminology, the surface area of luck, right? I forget exactly how it goes, but basically the more conversations you have, the more places you put yourself, you open up those opportunities. And I think one of the things that happens is it's usually like looking for a job, right? Like you never know where it's going to come from. It's usually from like some contact that's one contact away from you. It's not necessarily who you think it's going to be, but it does take just getting out there and having discussions. It just takes, I think, talking to a lot of people.
So it lands to my question. What makes you a good networker, Renee? What do you think that you learned about the power of networking, and what do you feel like you do uniquely that makes this work?
I don't know that I do a lot of networking. I don't know that I consider myself particularly good at it, to be honest. But I think that one thing you have to do is you have to have a lot of conversations, right? And you don't always know where the conversations are heading. There's a balance. And I don't know that I always get the right balance because I think there is a balance of, do you have too many conversations that are not useful and you're wasting your time, right? Because at the end of the day, it does take a lot of time to do networking. And sometimes it's like, I don't have time to go meet all these people and do all this stuff because I have to do work. I have other stuff I need to do, right? So I think sometimes you have to be a little bit patient where you don't know where things are going to go, but kind of have a little bit of process. And this is sort of that surface area of, the surface area of luck thing I was saying. Sometimes you just have to talk to smart people and talk to good people and see where things go. And you don't totally know where it's going to go. But on the other hand, you do have to balance that where it gets, I've had periods of time where it's like, I can't do any more introduction calls because I just don't have time and it takes up all your time. And you're like, there's only so many of these I can do. So I do think you have to start to build a little bit of what are you doing with it and what are your goals out of these, right? And kind of go into it, not transactional. So it's not like you won't talk to somebody if they won't fit your goal, but to have some general idea of how this is going to, what you want out of things. Because I think if you go in very cold and don't have any, I've done that sometimes too, where it's kind of like, I'm just talking to anybody. And then you're like, okay, after a while, it's just gotten out of control and there's no reason for me to talk to these people. So I think you need to keep it in a sector. Retail is a good example, right? You talk about retail tech, you're in the same sector. Generally, even if it's not a perfect fit here or there, there's probably some way that you'll connect or be able to help each other in some form or fashion. So it makes some sense, even if it's just learning about things and knowing what's out there. If I start talking to somebody in banking and then I go start talking to somebody in pharmaceuticals, how much is that really going to help? It's interesting, but it's not really probably either going to help either one of us to a certain extent because it just starts to get too far from your circle, right? So I do think you need to kind of land a circle of where do you want to be and build that. And even if you end up changing it, or I think if you try to go too wide, it's really difficult because you just won't find enough connection points.
Yeah. And it sounded like it materialized, but you started to position yourself as it too. Was there, positioning statement that you used to get at that?
I mean, I don't know that I'm the best example of this because I don't feel like I did a very good job of it. But a board resume is one thing people do, and I did do that. And that's a different way of approaching it. So I think there is a board resume to do. I'd recommend people start to look at that. And even if it's just starting out as skills that you're going to bring and different ways you can bring that together. Of course, when I started this, there wasn't as much AI. I think probably AI can give people a lot of ideas about it now. I don't know that I have the perfect way of doing it, but I do think there are some ways you can just talk about it and get it out there, put it on your LinkedIn profile, start having those discussions around with people. I have seen organizations that will give people pro bono to start with, right? They'll say like, hey, your first advisory position, you just do it for free. I'm not a huge fan of that, but I can see if it's your first one ever and you just want to get something in there and try something. If you have a friend that has a startup, if you have something, I always say, there's so many people who want to have help and advice, right? Like there's no shortage of people out there. There's so many startups. There's so many people looking for things or doing side projects. I think if you really want to do it, you just got to start somewhere, even if it's small. It's kind of like being a startup. Like you have to get your first customer somehow, right? I talk to tech companies all the time. And they're like, I'd love to work for Nike or L'Oreal. And I'm like, well, not your first one, right? You're going to need to build yourself up before you go get Nike or L'Oreal, right? You've got to start somewhere. And sometimes that means starting with a small company, starting with something. And I think that's part of it. You just have to do it.
Before we get too far off from it, what the heck is a board resume? You see, this is I'm like, what is a board resume?
It's just, it looks like a regular resume, but you just go about it a little bit differently. Your goal is to get an advisor or board position, right? So you highlight things a little bit differently. You highlight leadership positions you've had before. Your goal from the resume is not to get a job. There's some templates online. You can look online and stuff. Yeah. And it does take some time thinking like, I have a weird background. I have a finance background. I have a marketing background. I have an operations background. I have to think about like, okay, what is it about me that I can bring? And then I realized something, okay, maybe my finance background's a little bit more important for this than it would be for something else if I was looking for a CMO job or something like that, right? So I think that you have to think a little bit about what are you really bringing to the company and what types of companies would benefit from your experience and what type of experience do you bring that is unique. And I think when you get into more of the public board roles, they will have like an auditing chair. They'll have different things that people bring in. And I think they are looking for you to bring something from outside, and you have to think about what that is and be able to tell that story through the resume.
Okay, so real talk. I don't know about you, but that was a lot. A board of directors, advisory boards, non-exec roles, formal versus informal, timing networks, getting pulled in through people, sometimes paid, sometimes not. It's one of those moments where it sounds simple until you hear how many moving parts there actually are. And if you're sitting there thinking, wait, how is anyone supposed to actually do this without it becoming a full-time job in and of itself? Well, it probably helps that Renee will be the first to tell you she's not great at saying no. You just talked about like anywhere between 5 to 10 boards you might be on any given time, flex up, flex down. Is that overwhelming? Where's your time, Renee? Like, what does this look like in terms of commitment?
I think that there's a term that people use when they start doing this stuff, and it's called portfolio, right? There is a management of the portfolio that comes in. Sometimes there's too much going on. Sometimes there's not enough going on. And I think you do, as an independent person, need to kind of try to manage that to the best that you can. I've seen people have all different types of ways that they manage it. I think you have to find out what's right for you. I'll give you one example. I met a woman who's a venture capitalist, and she's on a lot of advisory boards. I asked her the same question. I said, like, how do you deal with all this? Like, where do you draw the line? And she said, I've gotten to the point where my rules are such that I won't email anybody. And they said, don't expect me to send you any documents. Don't expect me to do anything. But here's my WhatsApp number. Anytime you want to talk to me and you have a problem, you can contact me. But don't expect me to go the other way, right? So I think it's partly starting to better understand the lines, and certainly, especially early on, and I still do this sometimes, I've overcommitted or I've taken on something that I think maybe the roles weren't quite clear enough. I think that's where things get difficult. So that's another reason I think having these formal agreements are, hey, I need you for 2 hours once a quarter. Okay, well, that's a very different, that's doable, right? That's pretty easy. Anybody can do that. That's different than saying, I'm going to call you and ask you to do stuff every day, right? That's where you need to kind of set these. That's why I think that formal one is good, because you want to go into it and where everybody's clear on what the expectations are. So you don't feel like you're not giving enough or too much, and they don't feel like you're not giving enough or too much. And really getting these roles out, I think, is where things kind of, can be more very helpful.
And probably helps you understand where you can dial up, dial down. Is
Yeah,
that how you think
exactly.
about
Exactly.
it?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And like I
yeah.
said, some are of varying levels. Some you might only spend a day or two a year on, right? So it's a different type of approach than one that wants you to spend like a third of your time there, right? That's a very different type of approach, you know.
Do you know when to say no to something like
It's a very good question. I think that is a very difficult, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's a female thing, maybe it's a me thing, I don't know, but I feel like if anything, I probably have more. I'm trying to force myself to put more boundaries on. I think it is
Right.
honestly trying to do a good job and taking everything on. That's something I've had to learn over time, and I'm still trying to get the balance right for that.
I mean, it's really hard. Right now, what does it like look for you? Are you maybe spending like a couple hours a week advising for those companies versus consulting?
Yeah, probably so. I still do a mix of kind of consulting and advising. So
Yeah.
my goal over time is to change the pendulum to be more advising and sitting on boards and less consulting. Right now I'm probably heavier on the consulting piece than I am on the advising piece, but I think it's kind of finding that balance. I talk to so many of my friends who are working in corporate jobs and they say like, okay, one day I'm going to retire and I'm just going to be on boards all the time, right? And I think it's to your point of like, what does that mean exactly and how does that look like and how much time is that, right? I do think it is kind of finding that right balance. And I think there is a spectrum between, consulting, working at a company. A lot of people work at companies and are advising as well, which I actually am a big fan of. I think that's a smart idea. Some people are working a full-time job and doing advisory roles too.
Yeah.
So I think it is kind of just figuring out where you can, and part of it is just where can you add the most value, and
Right.
trying to help. And in theory, advising should be providing advice. It shouldn't be doing, whereas consulting is doing. I'm going to deliver you something. I'm going to give you something. Advising in theory should be, I'm going to tell you, maybe I'll make an introduction, maybe I'll give you some advice, let's talk about it, but it should be less time consuming over time as you go. Sometimes that changes depending on the company. And then the other thing I've been just starting to do a little bit more is working with founders to help create their advisory board.
And it's a space that you alluded to earlier that you're moving towards advising companies on.
I've had an advisory, even when I had my own startup, I had an advisory board. I would say I was very guilty of not using it as much as I should. We had a lot of great people, and honestly, we kind of didn't have a lot of formality around it. We sort of used them as we could. And I find that when I talk to founders, a lot of them will say, like, I had an advisory board, I didn't use it very much, I disbanded it, or I just sort of like have a lackadaisical, I feel bad.
Yeah. That's such a good point.
I don't talk to them that much. And I think it's hard because, particularly in startups, founders are busy. They have a lot of stuff going on.
It makes me think you've learned a lot about what makes a good board. Being both running a board yourself and then being part of it.
You need a structure. You need something to keep it going because there's always something else that's happening, and it is hard to kind of keep up with that. I'm a big believer in a more formal environment only because I've seen it work really well, right? I've seen, a couple of things happen in this more formal structured environment. One, the advisors get to know each other, actually. You get to develop a relationship with them. I was on an advisory board meeting for a tech company the other day, and there was all these great industry people on it. It's a company called Surface Technology, which is an AI, real estate AI company. They had all these great people who are running retail themselves, who are in the real estate business, and they're getting so excited that it makes everybody else get excited, right? So it's almost like you kind of get more bought in the more that you know these other people who are experts trust, and you say like, hey, if you know this, and you're saying it's great, why don't I get involved as well? And so I think you build off each other, and then there's this collective brainstorming. The other thing that I think is great is, having a problem that you tackle in some of the advisory board meetings, like, hey, we're having a problem with our pricing. We want to, figure out are we doing the right pricing, or we're looking at product market fit, or we need to work on, increasing our leads, or we have to figure out how to scale, having these types of issues where you kind of have a collective brainstorming. I think there's a lot of power in that.
Yeah. So many people talk about the value of operators. Obviously, you need to know how to get shit done. But also you're talking about the value of thought leader with these people. And it sounds like so many of these founders do need it, where their blind spots are.
Yeah. And I think that's part of it too, is thinking through from the founder's perspective. Well, I usually talk to founders about what type of expertise do you need, right? Who do you really want? What are the types of advice that you need? And some of it might be like an operator who's done stuff before. Other people might want someone who's raised a bunch of money and exited before. And one of the people on my advisory board was someone who had raised a lot of money and exited before. Whenever I had questions about how to deal with VCs, what to talk to, I went to him, and he always gave me like the best advice because he'd done it a lot and he knew what he was talking about. we had another guy who was on our advisory board who was a really great creative mind, right? And when we had creative issues, we used to go to him and talk about it. Very different expertise, very different people, but they both brought in expertise that was needed at certain times. So we were running an apparel brand. You needed financial input, you needed creative input, you needed people who knew how to do manufacturing. So I think you have to think about, as your company, what are the types of expertise that would be helpful to you? And retail tech companies, I work with a lot of retail tech companies. One of their biggest problems is go to market, right? How do you get retailers on board? It's hard, right? So sometimes they need people, sometimes they need marketing help, sometimes they need, thought leadership help. It's not always about just operating the company and the tech piece of it. It's like, how do you scale? How do you go to market? And who are the people who can get you there faster?
What has been the key learning about what makes a good board versus like when it goes wrong?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes there's a lot of things in both directions. So let me start from the founder perspective, right? So one area where I've seen it go wrong is they build a board and they just don't have a plan and don't manage it, right? And kind of say, like, I have this board of advisors, but I haven't talked to them in like 6 months. You talk to the advisor and they're like, I don't know what's going on with the company. And it just kind of like, sort of like falls apart just kind of by not having a plan and not being able to keep up with it. Second area I've seen where it goes wrong is the founder is looking at the board of advisor members as being their salespeople, right? And being transactional. This I hear a lot, right? Particularly in the tech industry, right? Because the tech industry and retail tech in particular, it's hard to get customers. All you want to do is get customers, right? And for the most part, when you're bringing advisors on, they really want their network, right? And that might be true, but I think there is a way of doing, like, I'll give you one example. I was talking to a CEO. He's on a bunch of advisory boards, and he told me, like, I'm on a bunch of these advisory boards, and some of them literally just want me to be their salespeople. They're offering me commissions to go out and sell their stuff. And he's like, I don't want to be a salesperson. But he said, but I have one company that I work with who really involves me in the business. They ask my opinion. They tell me all the things that are going on. And because I'm so bought into it and so interested in it, I want to introduce them to my network. Like, I want to do it because I feel really passionate about it. So I think you have to draw people into the strategy and really make them part of it. If you look at it transactional of like, hey, just go introduce me to your network, then it's kind of like, I don't care. I could go get commissions from a million other people. It's not really like, nobody's joining an advisory board because they want to go sell software. That's not why you join an advisory board. You're joining an advisory board because you want to be part of it, right? You want to be part of it and you want to be involved in it. You want to be part of the startup. And in order to do that, the founder has to open up and allow them to be part of it and to have that two-way street where they're becoming bought into the strategy, because then people want to go talk about it. They want to go evangelize about it, not because they're getting commission, not because you're asking them to, not because of all these other things, it's because they believe in the company and they'll talk to someone and say, like, hey, you got to talk to these guys. These guys are awesome. And that's where it really works. I feel like when you kind of have bought into it and you created this ability, I think when people go into it and say, like, I'm going to get these board of advisors in and try to pay them a commission and get them to give me a bunch of customers, that might be the end goal. And I understand that. That is realistically what people want. But there is a way to do that is helpful to both parties, and then there's a way to do it where you're kind of like sabotaging it to a certain extent.
I think maybe like bubbling it down, the questions that these companies should be asking themselves about what they're chasing should be better. For you, like, what is a smart question that a company is asking themselves as they get an advisor? Is it that they figure out their needs and, where they're lacking expertise, as opposed to thinking of straight lead gen? Like, who's going to give me the best leads?
I think it's exactly what you just said, which is, what are the needs that I have and who's able to give me that? And whose advice do I want at the end of the day? Like, who, when I need to figure out, like, what should I do about this? Who do I want to call, right? Who do I believe in that's going to give me the right advice about this? And I think that is really what's most important, right? And maybe it's somebody who's sold a company before, maybe it's somebody who's scaled before, maybe it's somebody who's been in the industry for 30 years and knows a lot of people, right? So knows how things get done. But it's not just like, I want to get you for your contacts. It's not a transaction of I'm trying to access your contacts. It's like, hey, you have 30 years of experience in this industry. Help me better understand it, because I don't know this industry, right? Help me better understand it. And then together we'll go out and figure out how to do that, right? So I think that is like, what do you really want from them? And if the answer is only I want their network, it's not going to work.
Right. It becomes a transaction, and it also becomes great. You're getting a network and you're getting things, but you're not filling holes. If that makes sense.
Ultimately, the advisor is not going to be fulfilled by that. I can guarantee you that. Like, it's not something people are going to want to do. So I think that's part of it too. Is if that's all you want, you're better off going and doing, like, getting a sales agent or something. Like, there's other ways to accomplish that besides that.
That kind of symbiotic relationship between both. Yeah. Obviously, things get scrappy, but what makes good advice?
I mean, I think part of it is telling them what they don't want to hear sometimes, right? To be the one who's not saying yes, but saying, like, I don't know about this. Like, I really think you should think about X, Y, Z. Being able to kind of question them, and in a nice way, but like in a way that is, you're not just there to say yes to everything. It's to kind of be that, I don't love this term, but like a sparring partner for lack of a better word, somebody who will kind of talk to them and bring things up. I think the other piece is sharing experiences and advice, and maybe that's from you, maybe that's from other people, but like real world experience. Even sometimes it might be like, I knew this other founder who had this happen, and then here's what they did about it, or let me introduce you to them, and you can talk to them, right? So sometimes it is about just providing, experience and perspective of what have I seen before in the past, and where are some mistakes, right? Like I think I've made a ton of mistakes as a founder, and there's a lot of ones that a lot of people make those same mistakes, the same ones over and over again. And once you've seen people make the same ones over and over again, you can be like, this is a very common mistake that people make, right? So seen it, And then I think the other one is, I do think there is a certain amount of, I don't know if it's credibility in opening your network up. Like I do think to be a good advisor, you do at some point need to open your network up and to connect people and to provide that kind of credibility and experience and to help them get things done. Not necessarily that you're going to be doing reports for them or anything like that, but it is helping them meet some investors. It is being a resource there when they want to raise investment. It is being a resource when they want to bring clients in. And it means talking about them. So you do have to go to bat and do stuff for them. I think it's not necessarily like producing a work product, but you do need to help them in some form or fashion. And that's always different, I think, in different ways of how that happens.
And it sounds like something you said earlier, you become much more comfortable with that because you buy into their strategy. You're brought along, and then it's like you believe in it, and then you can actually sell them and sell your Rolodex because I actually believe in this product. As we wrap and close, questions for you. What did you feel like you knew about what it was to become an advisor versus like where you had to figure it out? In that first one, is it paid? Is it unpaid?
I think there's not a lot of formal training and advisory stuff. Everybody kind of needs to figure it out a little bit on their own to a certain extent because everybody approaches it slightly different. And I think it depends a lot on what your current role is and what you're trying to get out of it. For instance, I've met people who are in a corporate role, right, who work full-time in corporate, and their perspective is like, I don't need to get any paid. I don't really want to get paid. I just want to get experience, right? I just want to do some of these experience. I want to just start building up my resumes. I don't really care if I get something paid or not. And there's other people who are saying like, I've only got limited hours in the day, and if I'm going to spend time on this, I need to be paid for that, right? And so I think there's a wide range of, different ways that people approach it. Some people want equity, some people want cash. So I think you have to think a little bit about what you want as the advisor. Like you work independently, you have to start thinking about what am I going to charge for this, right? And it's the same thing. Right. It's the same principle with advisory. It's just that there's maybe some different types of currency, different types of ways that you do that. But I think at the end of the day, you have to think about like, what's a fair exchange for me? What's a fair exchange for them? What are they going to get out of it? What am I going to get out of it? And is that the right balance? And are we both going to feel good about it at the end of the day? And so I do think you need to put the time into it up front. That's where I think sometimes, especially early on, people are doing this, you kind of rush through that part. And I do think you need to kind of take the time to figure out, is this the right fit? What is really expected of me? And vice versa.
Yeah, well, of course. I just think of when I started consulting, I began to have conversations with other consultants about what their rate was. For you, was it talking to other board members?
It is. Yeah. Okay. I think I did. I talked to a lot of people. There are some like surveys out there of what people get paid, what's the advisory compensation. It's like an organization that does surveys every year, so put that out. But honestly, most of it was just talking to people, right? It was just sort of like, hey, what do you think is reasonable? Is this amount, how long? I do think getting to know other people who are doing the same thing, I think is helpful too, to get a better sense of what's the potential and what's the right fit for you.
Yeah. And that to me is the ambiguity people have to navigate that they just don't.
It's like you said, it's just like the same thing going out on your own in consulting, right? You have to kind of figure that out. And everybody goes through that process of like, what should my hourly rate be? What should my day rate be? What kind of projects should I do? It's really the same approach. I think there's two things I've seen where people find it a little bit difficult to get into this. One is they don't have a network or they don't work the network enough. Right. That's one area. And then the other area, I think, is there are people who have worked for large companies for their whole life, and all of a sudden going out and doing this is just different. It's like, how do you structure something like that? There is a little bit of this, you kind of do have to act as an independent agent to a certain extent.
Yeah. And I also, the third piece is not that they don't have the network, but they don't know the decision makers. Huge. That's that at the end of the day is the make or break. Just as you were talking, I have two questions. One is there a concept of a non-compete?
I I think yes. I think that's kind of case by case. I don't think it's like a standard, but it depends on I think the level that you're at and the company itself. Publicly listed companies with on board, those are big positions. Those have a lot of responsibilities. Likely to see non-competes there.
I've never thought about this, but when you think of boards, do you have to think of yourself as an LLC? We think about it as a consultant, but now I'm thinking for a board of advisors that applies as well. Is that something that people should be thinking of?
You don't have to be. I've seen people do it both ways. I think no matter what, there's a personal piece of it as well.
Last question is, what is the biggest myth about boards? We've talked about a lot of them: timing, access, paid, unpaid. But for you, what's the biggest?
I was at a retail women in tech thing the other day, so I've got women on my mind, and I think it is a little bit of a women thing, waiting for things to be perfect, right? It's like I'll go be a board, do a board once I have this, or once I get this, I can do it. Once I do that, once I retire. That being said, like you're probably not going to go get on the board of Walmart tomorrow, right? But how do you just get started and do things? You don't have to wait. You can just go out there and help people and find ways to be of value to other companies and other founders. It doesn't always have to be about waiting for X to happen.
We spend so much time waiting for things to feel ready, right? Like there's going to be some clear moment where it clicks, where we finally have enough experience or clarity, proof that we belong in the room. But it doesn't really seem to work like that in practice. From what Renee describes, it's messier than that. It's timing, relationships, small starts, conversations that at first don't even feel like board opportunities. You just start before it fully looks like the thing you think it's supposed to be. And I don't know, that part sticks with me. And maybe it does with you too.